Hello, friends. I'm with my men's group this week. Really a wonderful group of men that I've been meeting with for many years, with a few changes of people from time to time. And it's such a deep, deep opportunity to practice together, to go into the ground of ourselves, and to look at what each of these men is doing in their lives, in their professional lives, in their family lives. It's so rich. Today, we were focusing in, or I was focusing in on the question of intelligence. Now, I'm not going to try to give a definition of intelligence. What I'm going to talk about it is what I perceive as three fundamental kinds of intelligence. So, the first and oldest form of intelligence is the intelligence of the body itself. Arguably, life has been evolving, and life on planet Earth, which is the only life we really know about, has been evolving for the 4+ billion years that planet Earth has been here, to bring about an evolution, a bodily form like our own, and many, many other bodily forms. And as an emergence out of all kinds of generative, creative expressions of life on the so-called family tree, we emerge. And yet, to think that intelligence is just what we understand conceptually, and not truly honor and respect that the body is itself intelligent, the ancient, oldest form of intelligence. We'll come back to this. The second form of intelligence I would call feeling. And it is not as old as the body, not as old as life itself, but very, very old. An amoeba, you look at it under the microscope, and if it starts moving, there's a word for the movement, but I won't talk about that. If it starts moving and it moves toward water that's getting hotter, it turns around and moves away. If it's moving toward water that's too acidic or too basic, it turns around and moves away. So how does it know that? How does it know that? It doesn't think, oh, and is it just mind, blind The answer is it feels something. It senses something. We may not be able to understand what that is for a very, very ancient single-cell form of life. But if it doesn't seem too speculative, it feels something. And then the third and youngest form of intelligence, the conceptual mind, the mind that uses concepts. Concepts are themselves words and constructions of words. And that intelligence, best we know, from archaeological and paleontological evidence, is maybe 40, 50, 60, 70,000 years old. I suspect once the species Homo sapiens was here, it had some form of conceptual, symbolic, representational intelligence, an intelligence expressed through concepts, through words. And I have no doubt that all the other proto-humans, the Neanderthals, I can't remember, some of the other names right now are just jumping out of my mind. So this is a very young form of intelligence. And why this is important is because we don't recognize that feeling is actually an older and more superior form of intelligence to thinking. And we are completely arrogant, hubristic in our sense of what we understand conceptually. Yet we can see every day the insanity of the things we do from our conceptual mind. The most recent is the stampede of trillions of dollars into AI and creating the data centers that allow AI to function. And well, that's a capitalist kind of, and I would call it malignant capitalist. In a different talk, I discussed this expression. What it really is about is an inability to feel whether this is actually in harmony with the planet or in harmony with human life, in harmony with nature. But for the people, the billionaires and the companies, the multi-billion valued large tech corporations, the incredible fortunes they're pouring into this seems intelligent. And they rationalize that intelligence by saying, look at what it might do for medicine. Look at what it might do for freeing up time and replacing human effort with superior forms of artificial intelligence and so forth. And yet at the same time, many people within that world are frightened that that intelligence might turn against us, which makes total sense. Because when you look at the world through the intellect, if you look the way Darwin looked, if you look at the world not only through the intellect, but through the kind of conceptualization of reality with a jealous, possessive, dominating God as the one that's in the Old Testament, completely different than, let's say, the Tao, which comes from not quite as old as the Old Testament, but from an Eastern way of, an Eastern philosophy of relationship to the what is. Taoism is a much more feeling rooted philosophy of consciousness, expression of consciousness. So here we are with this mental construction that we consider intelligent, yet more and more weapons, more and more rationalization. Identity is not at the level of feeling. When you look out at the world through a particular mental structure, as kind of where I was a moment ago, and you see survival of the fittest. The heart, the feeling intelligence looks out and sees amazing, exorbitant, effervescent generativity, creativity. It's survival of the most original and expressive, inventive and pageantry of generative creativity, not survival of the fittest. That's pure intellect. That's a way of looking at things in terms of domination and in terms of this or that, me or you, past and future, which is the intelligence of the intellect. And I've had so many experiences, I'm sure you have too, where in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, some dynamic inside of you is utterly changed. And in fact, I would say it's at the level of feeling that we are shown those moments in our lives that are so exceptional that if you have in a lifetime these kinds of exceptional moments where you see reality in a way you never could have imagined before. I'm thinking of B.B. Griffiths, who was a Cambridge student, British man, who, as he kept studying, he reached a certain point in his life. He was in his 20s, and he was just overwhelmed by a sense of panic and desperation. And he went running, by his own report, running wildly through the woods near the university until suddenly, in the middle of the woods, he was stopped dead in his tracks, and he experienced that everything was alive. He experienced the earth and the trees and the sky as all one living continuum. And that sensation, that feeling of belonging and oneness was so profound that nothing in his academic intellectual training that was trying to steer him toward an understanding of reality compared in its significance. And as a result, he gradually changed his life radically and continuously and ended up living in a monastic environment in India till the end of his years. That's just one example. I was on an airplane 7, 8 years after I had been on one that nearly crashed and had taken me to terrible, terrible PTSD. I just would panic over and over again. Just the sound of the wings, the wings getting bigger or smaller, the engine changing or revving in a different way, the littlest bump. And then one day, there was 7 years after this highly traumatic near plane crash that I was in. By the way, fasten your seatbelts. I saw people stuck from head to heel on the roof of the fuselage of an airplane. And 15 people taken off that flight in stretchers. The airplane structurally damaged that would never fly again. Of course, after that, flying was really scary for me. I'll leave this story behind for now, except that 7 or 8 years later, I'm sitting on an airplane, turbulence hits, and without thought, I just closed my eyes and hummed into this ball of fear, anxiety, panic, terror that was sitting here in my belly. The second hum, snap. Not like a toothpick, I mean like a branch snapping, bigger. That sound is what I remember. And then I was the airplane. I was the fuselage of the wings. I was the whole thing. I was the air, the waves of air changing pressure. I was the ground below. I wasn't sitting near a window. I knew I was the ground below. I knew I was the air. I knew I was the sky out to infinity. I was all that, right then and there. And another passenger sitting directly next to me, when that snap happened for me, I'm sure it didn't happen for that passenger, but he or she, I don't remember clearly, just slumped forward like this and just was gone for maybe a minute. Meanwhile, I have, from that day, from those seconds, never had fear on an airplane again, though I've been in plenty of turbulence. So it ended in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. So there's a process of movement in consciousness, shift of levels. That was not a shift of state. That was a shift of level from the separate individual with a history of trauma and just an inbuilt reaction to the slightest sound to someone who doesn't exist in anymore. So that moment, that very brief moment of the felt sense of absolute belonging, absolute oneness, which is the first of several in my life, that moment I became a disciple of. And that listening, that turning toward anxiety, that turning toward fear, became the basis of the path I walk, or a piece of the basis of the path I walk. But what I'm getting to is, in your life, you're going to have certain moments like that, where suddenly your whole construction about you and what's happening is gone, and you settle into a sensation where there's implicit forgiveness or implicit trust, whether it's beyond well-being, it's beyond ordinary peace, where there's an understanding of the continuum of yourself with all of life, all of existence. That intelligence changes everything. It changes how you choose to live, how you choose to build your world, if you pay attention. As I said, in my life of that magnitude and of several times of a greater magnitude, that's only happened 3 times. And then many, many, many times, but not quite at that magnitude since. It's like it took me to the threshold between dimensions and worlds, right? I can't explain that other than to say that it's built into what we are. But now this tremendous reliance on intellect as a form of intelligence is killing us, because feeling doesn't give you an identity. Thinking gives you an identity. Feeling doesn't give you nationality. Thinking gives you nationality. Feeling doesn't give you a religion. Thinking gives you a religion. Now, what you think, the rituals with which you express certain things like your religion or your nationalism or your patriotism, that of course is going to engender an emotional state. But it's not the emotional state of the deep ground of belonging to what is the true nature of the human being as emergent from life, from nature itself. And so when the body, yesterday I said something to one of the men in the men's group. I said he was going to cook something with a sous vide method as opposed to the menu that Kathy, after a lot of work, had left out for us to do to prepare salmon. And I was so possessive of the month of work I saw Kathy doing and hard work to cook, freeze, prepare all kinds of things for this men's group, that when he said he was going to do it with a sous vide, which he gave us as a gift a few years ago, so we have it, but we've never used it. I just did something weird. I said, I don't like food in a sous vide, which isn't true. It isn't really true. But I wanted somehow to dig him. I wanted to take something away from him. I went to bed, not thinking much about it, but I woke up in the moment in like 4 a.m. period where the darkness comes, with a deep, deep, dark, abysmal feeling comes that I've learned to live with, learn to turn to, learn to welcome. I never like it. It's not a sensation you can like or want, but it wants me. It wants you too. And in that dark sensation, I clearly saw and felt what I had done with that man, right? And I made a determination I would apologize to him. And then something happened in the dynamic with the men's group where another man was sharing, and it became a natural door for me to express that apology. But the man to whom I had brought that bad energy said, oh, it just seemed authentic. And I said, well, that's your mind rationalizing it. We have a complex relationship. You have a lot of respect for me. You've projected a lot on me. You elevate me. What did you actually feel? And he didn't answer me. He went on, you were being authentic. It's you. And I don't know. I said, what did you actually feel the second time? And he said, well, there was a barb. And I went, yes, stop. That's it. I communicated with you in a way that created a barb. And I knew it. I knew it at the time, but then the rest of the evening flowed on. But the darkness gave it to me. The darkness has given me so, so much. Now, that is feeling intelligence. The darkness isn't a concept. It's a word I'm using to describe this abysmal place. And when the abysmal place is highly activated, highly amplified, it can be horrible. And it was horrible. And over the years, by turning to it, by breathing with it, by respecting it, by asking it, what do you want me to see now? What are you offering me to understand? I would talk to it that way and listen. And this last night, again, maybe the thousandth or many thousands of times I've sat with the darkness. You know what it says in the Tao Te Ching? Know the light, stand close to the dark. Know the masculine, stand close to the feminine. It's so true. At any rate, that is feeling intelligence. It is ancient and it is wise beyond words. Much wiser than the brilliant talking heads. I think of Jordan Peterson, who doesn't have is intellectually amazing. And for people that love conceptual coherence, he's mesmerizing and powerful. But if you really listen in your body, this is an angry man, an unhappy man, deeply unhappy man. And he's trying to convince with his words, his talk, convince. He's not trying to embrace, rejoice, celebrate, love the people he's talking to. And he's very oriented toward the Old Testament, to the biblical. And you can see that kind of result, in Christianity everywhere, that going back to the Old Testament, whereas the New Testament, the teaching of Jesus, is a pure teaching of feeling. Love one another. Love one another. If your enemy, carries you away, pray for him. And ultimately, don't defend your identity. Don't defend your purpose. Lay it down. If defending it would put you into a polarized position, close your heart, or put a barb in the other person, or close their heart, or make them angry, cause them to react. That is not intelligence. That's what the mind does. That's why we're in the miserable place we are. That's why the trail of tears, when we, in the 1900s, were making Native American people leave their land and march ruthlessly, dying from blankets we gave them that were filled with diseases they had no immunity to. And the trail of tears just keeps going and going and going. It's in Gaza. It's everywhere again and again. And every person that's involved in doing that justifies, rationalizes, has a belief that their way is the right way, the superior way, the better way, more God-given way, the more, just fast expand that to the big billionaire corporations, where any idea that can be pushed forward that comes from the aspect of the true value of intellect, to perceive and examine the world around us, right? But applied technologies are all mind, and the application often has some benefit, but cumulatively is destroying us. And if you could feel your oneness with nature, which is very difficult to do in a city-like world, if you can feel that love does not want you to bring something painful to another. Love does not want you to think in a way that closes your heart, that makes you superior or inferior, that makes you polarized with anyone. Love could never want that. Love is the very nature of how the truth and wholeness and beauty and goodness of the universe, truth, wholeness, beauty, goodness of the universe is known all at once in direct experience. It's the backbone of existence. It's the ground of everything. And the ground is not consciousness prior to an object or a subject. The ground is not non-dualism. Those are philosophies of the mind that are coherent to a certain point. But when you actually reach that ground, it is not non-dual. It is not consciousness prior to or anything else. It is a felt sense of belonging, of unbroken connectedness, of oneness and love. And out of that love comes communication that's benign and benevolent. Out of that, transactions that are benign and share benevolence. Out of that love comes goodness. Out of that love comes the innate appreciation of beauty. Out of that love is the experience of the wholeness of things. That intelligence comes from a source we do not understand, but you only can know it through feeling. Right? Now take the body intelligence. Well, without the body being incredibly sophisticated, we couldn't register feeling like that. But if you try to imagine the body as the ones that would flagellate themselves and whip themselves and starve themselves and do all these kinds of things to have an experience of oneness. But when you go about denigrating the body to have an experience of oneness, like the Desert Fathers or certain of the Christian mystics, you're going to have an experience of God, but it's not going to be a nice God. It's going to be an angry God, a demanding God, a possessive God, the God that says, do it this way, there's only this way, which ain't no God at all. It's an experience of an imbalance because the approach to God was imbalanced. And it has been for a long, long time. But what is the body? This thing that's just, I can't remember who called it, a sack of bone and dung. One of the great mystics, great saints. Nonsense. Every cell of the body, the cell membrane outside of the body, one atom wide around that cell, or one molecule of sodium rather, and chloride, magnesium, and chloride or carbonate, they're switching. Now, there's one next to another, around the cell. That's billions of them next to each other in one cell, switching 500 times a second. Right? And that activity is called a cell membrane. And it's through that activity that things enter each cell and things leave each cell. And every cell is doing that in accordance to its design. So if it's a cell that's differentiated in the liver, it's doing it according to that. If it's a muscle cell, it's doing it according to that. And yet every one of the 100 trillion cells that has these billions of exchanges 500 times a second, can you imagine that? And it emerged. We don't know how. Deep evolutionary biologists and chemists are trying to understand the origin of life. We have certain good ideas, fascinating to think about, that take us back into organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, the so-called Krebs cycle, all kinds of fascinating stuff that often is just a little beyond me. I was never a scientist. I was always this. But I had such a love of science because you needed some basis of it just to be in medicine. And I had a love of medicine, except I was passionate about a different level of medicine. The medicine of deep change, the medicine of awakened feeling, and the medicine that is the embodiment. Embody your feeling. Embody it. Touch things, move, walk with awareness, with presence, with embodiment. And the closer you get embodied, the closer you're into the now of your body when you dance, when you sing, and even when you talk. Kathy and I, in our council activity, have from time to time, with just one expression, felt a shift of energy that was so powerfully healing. And that expression of words did not come from thought. It may have had a ground in feeling, but not feeling coherent enough to say, oh, I'm feeling love, I want to say something loving to you. Not at that level. It's emerging out of the great intelligence and transposing itself through layers of body, trillions of cells doing billions of things every instant, and into words that can be, in rare occasions, life-changing. But that kind of life change is enduring. Now there's a new compass which you live your life by. So when you look at the world, the polarization, the cultural arguments, this is all mind. It is an inferior, it is the youngest form of intelligence. It's an inferior form of intelligence. Get into yourself and feel what it's doing to you. If it's making you angry, it is not true. It's not part of the coherence of nature itself. It's not part of survival of the most emergent, creative, generative, often playful expressions of life. Survival of the fittest is completely stupid. But it's a Old Testament kind of mentality. And you slow down. You come home to yourself. And you begin to sink deep into incarnation, into embodiment. You give less and less energy to anything that the mind does that polarizes you, closes your heart, makes you angry, makes you belligerent, makes you resentful, makes you possessive, makes you jealous. That is the path of intelligence. That is the way. It's not ordinary spirituality. It's not fine enlightenment. It is enlightenment. Getting deeper into your embodiment, deeper into your feeling intelligence, and then letting that observe, witness, and transform your thinking away from what kills love, away from what damages love. That is enlightenment. That is the path of enlightenment. Just sitting on a cushion and waiting for an aha is a very, very limited path. It has no genius in it, no originality in it. It's not a simple path, this path. But what you're given are those few special moments. And if you pay attention to them, because they are not like anything else you've lived before, if you pay attention to them, you build your consciousness life, spiritual, if you will, life, by making sense of them, by understanding them, by obliging yourself to be obedient to that feeling, by obliging yourself to be incredibly honoring of your body. You honor your body as it ages. You honor your body as you lose function. You honor your body when it's ill, when it's diseased. When you're in deep, profound suffering, all you can do at that time is ask for help. And there's much good help. But then once that intensity of suffering from a high fever or from chemotherapy or from a bad injury, once that's subsiding enough, you come back into the feeling intelligence. You come back into the wonderment of the body intelligence. That's my message for today about intelligence. Listen with your body. Listen to the politicians with your body. Don't get into responding with anger. That's what they want. That's what that level of mind wants. Listen with your body, and then make your life an effulgence of creative, generative rejoicing through your relationships, through how you attend to others, through how you take care of yourself, through how you take care of Mother Nature, how you minimize things that are harmful to nature. Minimize your use of AI. Since a simple AI answered question uses about 5 drops of water, uses about a quarter of a megawatt of energy. Run a big television for 9 seconds on one AI query. Multiply that by 1 billion people doing that. And there's no hope that we can provide that with enough energy. Not until we've solved the problem of energy and we can operate on planet Earth like the sun. And we're not there yet. And even if we were, it would be the energy to cause more and more transformations of materials with more and more pollution. It wouldn't necessarily be carbon dioxide and methane, fossil fuel type pollution, but it will be pollution like plastic, just invading everything. So we can't step out of that, but we can be the healing energy inside of it. You can't step out of your use of things and your use of energy. You can minimize it. You can be intelligent in that way. And the people that think, well, there's no hope here, we're going to go to another star, we're going to go to another planet. It's so ludicrous. Just so ludicrous. Jane Goodall said it so clearly. Let Musk take Putin and Netanyahu and Xi Jinping and Trump and his acolytes and let them fly to that planet. Because there's no way you could create Earth again. There is no other Earth. There's the fundamental identity that the body knows, Earthling, organism. There's the fundamental identity that feeling knows, Earthling, one with the natural order. And this, never one with anything, just one with its own beliefs, its own teams, its own group. Use these talks, use the energy of them to drop into a place inside of yourself, the place I'm living from, the place I see and taste and share. Get closer to that in yourself and share that in your eyes, in your touch, in your voice. Blessings, my friends.